When my parents called to invite me to their 30th anniversary celebration at Le Croix, the fanciest restaurant in the city, I was genuinely touched. A chance to dress up, sip champagne, and celebrate my parents' milestone with the entire extended family? I couldn't say yes fast enough. "We're so excited you can make it, Priya," my mother gushed. "It wouldn't be the same without you." I spent 3 weeks' worth of my graphic designer salary on a stunning emerald dress that complemented my brown skin and had my hair styled in loose waves that cascaded down my back. When I stepped into that restaurant, with its crystal chandeliers and white tablecloths, I felt like royalty. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I scanned the room for my family, spotting my parents at the head table alongside my older brother Raj and his wife, my aunts, uncles, and older cousins. My father noticed me and waved me over. "Priya, you look beautiful, Beta," he said, kissing my cheek. Then he pointed across the room. "Your seat is over there." I followed his gesture to a smaller table in the corner. A table decorated with colorful paper plates, plastic cups, and balloon centerpieces. A table where my 10-year-old cousin Anya was already sitting, playing a game on her tablet. A table where my 7-year-old twin nephews were throwing dinner rolls at each other. The kids' table. I blinked, certain there was some mistake. "Dad, I think there's been a mix-up with the seating arrangements." My father's smile didn't waver. "No mix-up. We needed someone responsible to watch the children." "But I'm 28 years old," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I have a master's degree. I live alone. I pay taxes." I know," he patted my shoulder. "And that's why you're perfect for this. You've always been so good with kids." I wanted to argue, but my mother appeared beside him, champagne flute in hand. "Oh, good. You've told Priya about the seating. We really appreciate you doing this, honey. The little ones can be such a handful." My chest tightened as I watched them return to their table, the adult table, where my brother was already telling a story that had everyone laughing. Auntie Sue. "Priya." My nephew Devin tugged at my dress. "Can you open my juice box?" I stared at the main table, where servers were pouring wine and delivering appetizers on elegant small plates. Then I looked down at the kids' table, where the centerpiece was now partially dismantled and someone had spilled apple juice across the paper tablecloth. "Sure," I said, swallowing the lump in my throat. "Let me help you with that." As I sat down in the too-small chair, my expensive dress bunched uncomfortably around me, I couldn't help but wonder, was this how my family still saw me? As the perpetual child? The one who needed to be separated from the real adults? The irony wasn't lost on me. 3 days earlier, I'd closed a deal with a major client that would bring in 6 figures for my design firm. 2 weeks before that, I'd paid off the last of my student loans. I'd traveled to 9 countries on my own. I'd built a life. Yet here I was, cutting chicken nuggets into bite-sized pieces while my older brother, who still asked me how to attach files to emails, was treated like royalty at the main table. "Why are you sitting here?" asked Anya, looking up from her tablet with genuine confusion. "You're a grown-up." I opened my mouth to respond but found no words. How could I explain something I didn't understand myself? Across the room, champagne glasses clinked. My father stood up to make a toast about love and family and tradition. Everyone at the adult table raised their glasses in unison. At our table, Devin knocked over his juice for the second time, and it splashed onto my dress. The emerald silk darkened to forest green where the juice soaked in. "I'm sorry," he wailed, eyes wide with fear. "It's okay," I said automatically, dabbing at the stain with a paper napkin. It was an accident. But it wasn't okay. None of this was okay. I excused myself to the restroom, locking myself in a stall as tears threatened to spill, I hadn't cried in public since my college graduation, and I wasn't about to start now. I took deep breaths, forcing myself to calm down. This wasn't about a ruined dress or sitting at a kid's table. This was about respect, or rather, the lack of it. This was about being 28 years old and still being treated like I was 18. This was about my family's inability to see me as the adult I had become. My phone buzzed in my purse. A text from my best friend Zoe. "How's the fancy dinner going? Living the high life?" I stared at the message, torn between laughter and tears. If only she knew. When I returned to the dining room, composed but simmering with a quiet anger, I was met with a sight that made me stop in my tracks. My brother Raj was now sitting at the kids' table, his suit jacket removed and his tie loosened, helping the twins build a tower out of breadsticks. He looked up and grinned at me. "I decided to see how the fun people were eating dinner," he said. "Mind if I join?" I stood there speechless for the second time that evening. "Mom and Dad are deep in conversation with the Patels about their new vacation home," he continued, rolling his eyes. I was dying of boredom. Plus, the food over here looks way better. They get chicken nuggets, and we get some weird foie gras thing. As I took my seat beside him, something shifted inside me. The burning humiliation began to cool, replaced by something else. A realization that perhaps I'd been looking at this all wrong. Raj nudged me. "Remember when we were kids, and we'd sneak away from the adult table at Diwali because their conversations were so dull?" I did remember. We'd hide under tables, stealing sweets and making up stories about the adults and their serious grown-up talk. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "So," Raj said, lowering his voice conspiratorially, "I overheard something interesting before I escaped. Apparently, Aunt Meena and Uncle Vikram are separating." My eyebrows shot up. "No way! They've been married for like 35 years. That's not even the juicy part," he continued. "Uncle Vikram has been—" "Auntie Priya, Uncle Raj," Anya interrupted. "Can we play the napkin game?" The napkin game, our childhood invention where we folded cloth napkins into various animals and created stories about them. I hadn't thought about that game in years. Just as I was about to decline, Raj reached for a napkin. "I called dibs on making the elephant," he said, his fingers already working the fabric. And before I knew it, I was laughing, really laughing, as we fashioned an entire napkin zoo with the kids, creating increasingly absurd voices for each animal. The twins, usually hyperactive, were captivated, suggesting plot twists for our impromptu story. I caught my mother watching us from the main table, a curious expression on her face. When our eyes met, she quickly looked away, returning to her conversation. An hour passed like this. Toys created from sugar packets, stories woven from imagination, and an unexpected alliance formed with my brother, who I'd always seen as firmly in the adult camp of our family dynamics. When dessert arrived, ice cream sundaes for our table, delicate creme brulee for the adults, I realized I was having fun, genuine fun. "I'll trade you," Raj said, sliding his ice cream toward me and reaching for my spoon. I've always hated caramel. As we swapped desserts, I glanced over at our parents, still engaged in what appeared to be mind-numbingly dull conversation with relatives. My father checked his watch. My mother nodded politely at whatever Aunt Meena was saying, but her eyes were glazed with boredom. "Do you think they're having fun?" I asked Raj, nodding toward the adult table. He snorted. "Not a chance. Dad's been checking his watch every 5 minutes. Mom keeps giving him the 'can we leave yet' eyes." I considered this. So why did they even want this big fancy dinner? Raj shrugged. "Appearances, I guess. Showing off to the extended family. You know how they are." I did know. Image had always been important to our parents. The right schools, the right careers, the right partners, the right everything. And suddenly, I understood something that had eluded me for years. My parents' approval, which I'd been chasing for so long, came with strings attached. Strings that would keep me bound to their expectations, their traditions, their idea of what my life should look like. Just as this realization was sinking in, my father stood and clinked his glass for attention. "We have a special announcement," he said, his voice carrying across the restaurant. All eyes turned to him, including ours at the kids' table. As some of you know, Priya recently secured a major client for her design business. I froze, spoon halfway to my mouth. My father was talking about my work? In public? "What we haven't told anyone yet," he continued, "is that her client is Sing International. Yes, the Sing International. And they've contracted her for their complete rebranding. It's the largest contract they've ever awarded to an independent designer." Murmurs of surprise and appreciation rippled through the room. At the adult table, aunts and uncles who had spent years asking when I would get a real job now looked impressed. "We didn't seat Priya at the main table tonight," my mother added, standing beside my father, "because we've been planning a surprise." She gestured to the waitstaff, who wheeled in a cake, not for my parents' anniversary, but decorated with the words, "Congratulations, Priya." I felt Raj's hand on my shoulder, squeezing gently. "Surprise," he whispered. "They've been planning this all week." As the entire restaurant applauded, I sat frozen in shock. My mother beckoned me to join them at the main table, but for the first time in my life, I didn't rush to follow her direction. Instead, I looked around at the kids' table, at the napkin animals we'd created, at the mess of ice cream and crumbs, at the genuine joy we'd shared here away from the stuffiness of the adult world. "Actually," I said, finding my voice, "I think we're good right here. Why don't you all join us instead?" The room fell silent. My mother's smile faltered. My father looked completely confused. It was a small act of rebellion, but in that moment, it felt enormous. I wasn't rejecting their celebration of my success. I was rejecting the hierarchy that had defined our family for as long as I could remember. What I didn't expect was for my Uncle Vikram to be the first one to stand up. "The kid has a point," he said, picking up his dessert plate. "I'm coming over." One by one, the adults began to migrate toward our table, pulling up chairs, squeezing in where they could. My mother looked scandalized. My father appeared completely baffled. But as Uncle Vikram started folding his own napkin animal, a rather impressive peacock, and the twins cheered in delight, something remarkable happened. My mother laughed. A real laugh, not her polite social laugh. And then she too picked up her plate and made her way to our increasingly crowded corner of the restaurant. "Well," she said, squeezing in beside me, "this isn't quite how we planned to celebrate your success." "Plans change," I replied, passing her a clean napkin. "Sometimes for the better." As my father finally joined us, still looking somewhat disgruntled at this disruption to his carefully orchestrated evening, I felt a strange new confidence wash over me. For the first time, I wasn't seeking their approval. I was setting the terms of our relationship. What happened next would change the course of our family dynamic forever. But that's a story for another time. The restaurant manager looked utterly bewildered as he watched our family's impromptu migration. The meticulously arranged seating chart, likely planned with my mother's exacting instructions, had been completely abandoned. What had started as a formal, sophisticated anniversary dinner had transformed into something that resembled a chaotic family picnic, with adults perched on chairs meant for children and dessert plates balanced precariously on laps. "I don't understand," my father said, adjusting his position on a chair that was comically small for his frame. "We had the perfect evening planned. The speeches, the toast to our marriage, the surprise announcement about Priya's achievement. Life. Rarely goes according to plan, Dad, I said, handing him a paper napkin as his creme brulee threatened to drip onto his expensive suit. Sometimes the detours are where the real memories happen. My mother, who had initially appeared mortified by this breakdown of decorum, was now laughing as Anya taught her how to make a paper fortune teller out of the dessert menu. It was a side of her I rarely saw, the playful woman who existed beneath. The perfectly coiffed exterior she presented to the world. "Remember when we used to have picnics in the living room?" she asked, looking at my father. "Before we could afford fancy restaurants?" My father's expression softened. "You would spread that old blanket on the floor, and we'd eat sandwiches. And pretend we were in Central Park. I liked those dinners better than any restaurant," Raj chimed in. "You'd let us eat with our hands and tell ghost stories. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you." I stared at my brother, taken aback. "You remember that? You were like 5 years old." "Of course I remember," he said. "They're some of my favorite memories." This revelation stunned me into silence. I'd always assumed Raj's childhood had been as rigidly structured as my own adolescence had become once. Our parents achieved financial success. By the time I was a teenager, family dinners had transformed into formal affairs with strict etiquette rules. No elbows on the table, no speaking unless spoken to, no excusing yourself until everyone had finished eating. When had we lost that? Casual joy? When had appearances become more important than genuine connection? "We should do that again," I suggested, surprising even myself with the words. "A living room picnic, I mean. For old time's sake." My mother opened her mouth, likely to protest that we were too old for such childish activities. But my father spoke first. "I'd like that," he said quietly. "Your mother's cooking is better than this overpriced restaurant food anyway." The restaurant manager, who had been hovering nearby, pretended not to hear this critique as he asked if we needed anything else. "Just the check," my father said. "It seems we're taking this celebration home." And just like that, our family's carefully orchestrated anniversary dinner came to an early end. As we gathered our belongings, I caught my Aunt Mina watching me with an unreadable expression. "That took courage," she said softly as she passed me. "Standing your ground like that." Before I could respond, she was gone, following Uncle Vikram. Toward the exit, I wondered about Raj's gossip. Were they really separating after 35 years? And if so, what had finally pushed Aunt Mina to break free from a marriage that had always seemed perfect from the outside? The drive to my parents' house was silent, but not in the tense way I'd grown accustomed to after family disagreements. This silence felt contemplative, as though we were all processing the unexpected turn the evening had taken. As we pulled into the driveway of the 2-story colonial that had been my childhood home, I braced myself for the lecture that would surely come. My parents didn't appreciate spontaneity or disruption to their carefully laid plans. I'd been fielding their disapproval since I chose art school over the business degree they'd wanted for me, but the lecture never came. Instead, my mother disappeared into the kitchen while my father went to the living room closet and emerged with a familiar blue plaid blanket that I hadn't seen in years. "I can't believe you kept this," I said, running my fingers over the worn fabric. "Your mother wanted to throw it out when we redecorated," he admitted. "I couldn't let her. Too many memories." This sentimental side of my father was entirely new to me. Or perhaps it had always been there, buried beneath the weight of expectations and appearances. My mother emerged from the kitchen with a tray of hastily assembled sandwiches, cut into triangles the way she used to do when we were kids. "I don't have the ingredients for anything fancy," she apologized. "But I found some leftover chicken and made some chicken salad sandwiches." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "It's perfect," I said, helping her with the tray. "Exactly what I was hoping for." We settled onto the blanket in the middle of my parents' immaculate living room. the crystal chandelier above us casting a warm glow over this impromptu picnic. The formality of the restaurant was forgotten as we ate sandwiches with our hands, licking mayonnaise from our fingers like children. "So, tell us more about this Sing International contract," my father said, reaching for another sandwich. "How did you land such a big client?" This was unprecedented territory. My parents had never shown genuine interest in my design work before. They'd always treated it as a phase I would eventually outgrow when I was ready to pursue a real career. "Well," I began cautiously. They were looking to rebrand their entire corporate identity. Their current design is outdated. Very 1990s. Corporate with navy blue and gold. They wanted something that would appeal to younger consumers without alienating their established client base. I expected my father's eyes to glaze over, but instead, he nodded thoughtfully. "That's a difficult balance to strike. How did you approach it?" And just like that, I found myself explaining color theory and typography choices to my father, who listened with genuine interest. My mother, who had always been the more critical of my career choice, asked surprisingly insightful questions about my creative process. "I had no idea you were so strategic about all this," my mother admitted, looking vaguely embarrassed. "I always thought you just drew pictures." Under normal circumstances, that comment would have stung, but tonight it felt like an opening, an admission that perhaps she hadn't fully understood what I did for a living. "It's okay, Mom," I said. I never really explained it properly. Design is as much about problem-solving as it is about creativity. As the night progressed, our conversation drifted from my work to Raj's recent promotion, to stories from my parents' early marriage that I'd never heard before. The twins had fallen asleep on the blanket, their heads resting on decorative pillows my mother had reluctantly sacrificed to the cause. Anya was curled up in an armchair, still awake but quietly absorbed in her tablet. "I can't believe we're all sitting on the floor," my mother said, laughing softly. "If any of the neighbors could see us now, they'd probably be jealous," Raj said. "When was the last time the Patels had this much fun? They're always so busy trying to impress everyone." My mother's expression shifted. "We've become a bit like that too, haven't we? Always worried about appearances." The honesty of this admission hung in the air between us. My father reached for my mother's hand, squeezing it gently. "It's never too late to change," he said, as I watched my parents exchange a look of understanding that had nothing to do with social status or reputation. I realized that tonight had cracked open something that had been sealed shut for years, not just for me, but for all of us. Later, as I helped my mother clean up the remains of our impromptu picnic, she paused, a sandwich plate in her hand. "I owe you an apology, Priya," she said, her voice low so as not to wake the children who were still sleeping on the living room floor. "For tonight, and for many things." I froze, unsure how to respond. In 28 years, I'd never heard my mother apologize for anything. "The kids' table," she continued. "It wasn't because we don't see you as an adult. It was because we needed time to coordinate the surprise announcement with the restaurant staff. We thought if you were distracted with the children, you wouldn't notice us whispering with the manager." I set down the glass I was drying. "So, it wasn't because you still think of me as a child?" She shook her head, looking genuinely distressed. "Is that what you thought?" "Oh, Priya. No. If anything, we've been struggling to accept how grown-up you've become, how independent, how different from what we expected." "Different isn't bad," I said quietly. "No, it's not," she agreed. "It's just unfamiliar. When you were born, we thought we knew exactly who you would become. We had it all planned out. And then you turned out to be this entirely different person. This creative, brave, stubborn person who refused to follow our script. I'd never considered my life choices from this perspective before. that my parents' resistance wasn't about disappointment, but about adjusting expectations they'd held since before I was born. It took us a while to see that the person you've become is even more remarkable than the one we'd imagined, she continued. Tonight, watching you stand your ground, watching you change the entire dynamic of the evening without apology, I realized how much strength that takes. Strength we didn't teach you. The admission hung between us like a fragile, newborn thing. Part of me wanted to hold on to my resentment. It had been a familiar companion for so long, but another part recognized the courage it took for my mother to speak these words. Maybe, I suggested, we could start teaching each other now. She smiled, and for a moment, I saw the echo of the young woman who had once spread a blanket on the living room floor and called it an adventure. I'd like that, she said. Very much. When I finally left my parents' house the next morning, something fundamental had shifted. The ground beneath our family felt more solid than it had in years, as though tonight's impromptu picnic had stabilized a foundation that had been slowly crumbling under the weight of unmet expectations and unspoken resentments. As I drove home, my phone buzzed with a text from Raj. That was weird and kind of amazing. Same time next month? I smiled, typing back, absolutely. But maybe we should skip the fancy restaurant next time. 3 days later, I received an unexpected delivery at my apartment. The blue plaid blanket from my parents' closet, freshly laundered and neatly folded, with a note in my father's precise handwriting. For your living room picnics. Every adult should have one occasionally. It was such a small gesture, but it represented something monumental. An acknowledgement that I could be both an adult and someone who occasionally sat on the floor to eat sandwiches. That growing up didn't have to mean growing distant. That night, I spread the blanket on my living room floor and sat cross-legged in the middle of it, eating takeout straight from the container and drafting designs for Sing International's new logo. And for the first time in years, I felt wholly, completely myself, neither rebelling against my family's expectations, nor contorting myself to fit them. Just me, exactly as I was meant to be. But life has a way of testing new boundaries just when you think you've established them. And my family's newfound understanding was about to face its biggest challenge yet. 3 weeks after our unconventional family dinner, I was deep into the Sing International project when my phone rang. Seeing my mother's name on the screen, I answered with a smile, still riding the wave of our newfound connection. Priya? We need to talk. Her voice was tight, formal, a complete departure from the warmth of our recent conversations. My stomach dropped. What's wrong? Is everyone okay? Everyone is fine, she said. But there's something important we need to discuss. Your father and I are hosting a dinner for Mr. Singh and his family next weekend. They specifically requested to meet the designer behind their new branding. I sat up straighter, confusion giving way to cautious excitement. Meeting directly with the Singhs could open even more doors for my business. That sounds great, Mom. What time should I be there? There was a pause, one of those loaded silences that I'd learned to dread over the years. The thing is, she continued, this is a very important dinner. Mr. Singh is not just any client. He's connected to virtually every major business family in our community. I waited, sensing there was more coming. We thought, well, your father and I think it would be best if you presented a certain image, something more traditional. And there it was. The other shoe, dropping with a familiar thud. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. What exactly do you mean by traditional, Mom? I asked, though I already knew the answer. Your father's sister is coming to town. She's bringing a selection of saris. Beautiful ones, all very appropriate for a professional dinner. And she's bringing her son, Arjun. He's a doctor now, did you know? Just finished his residency at Johns Hopkins. I closed my eyes, the weight of realization settling over me. This wasn't just a client dinner. This was an ambush, a thinly veiled setup, disguised as a professional opportunity. "Mom," I said carefully, "are you trying to set me up with Cousin Deepa's brother-in-law's nephew again?" "He's a cardiologist," she replied, as if that answered everything. "And from a very good family. His parents are close friends with the Sings." For a moment, I was transported back in time, back to being the dutiful daughter who would have agreed to this arrangement to keep the peace. Back to swallowing my objections and squeezing myself into whatever mold my parents had prepared. But I wasn't that person anymore. The night at the kids' table had changed something fundamental between us. Or so I'd thought. "Mom," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "I'm happy to meet with the Sings to discuss their project. That's a professional obligation, I'm glad, to fulfill. But I won't be part of a setup with Arjun or anyone else." The silence that followed was charged with disappointment. "This isn't about a setup, Priya," she said finally. "This is about presenting our family properly to an important business connection. Surely you understand that." "What I understand," I replied, "is that you're asking me to pretend to be someone I'm not. Again." "It's just one dinner," she pressed. "One evening of making a good impression. For your father's sake, if not mine. For your career." The familiar guilt rose like bile in my throat. This was their most effective tactic, leveraging my love for them, my desire for their approval, against my own boundaries. "I'll think about it," I said finally, unwilling to commit to either option. After hanging up, I sat at my drafting table, staring blankly at the Sing International design spread before me. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd been hired to modernize their brand while my own family seemed determined to keep me locked in outdated traditions. My phone buzzed with a text from Raj. "Mom just called me about the Sing dinner. You okay?" I typed back, "Not really. Thought things were different now." His response came quickly. "They're trying. Change is hard for them." I frowned at the screen. "Are you taking their side?" "Not taking sides, but I see both perspectives. They genuinely think they're helping your career." His message stung more than my mother's transparent manipulation had. Raj had been my ally at the kids' table, my co-conspirator in disrupting the formal dinner. Now he seemed to be retreating to the safety of neutrality. "Easy for you to say," I typed. "They never try to parade eligible women in front of you." "Actually," he replied, "they invited Dr. Sharma's daughter specifically for me." Didn't mention that part, did they? This revelation stopped me cold. My brother, successful, obedient Raj who had followed our parents' life script to the letter, was also being manipulated? "What are you going to do?" I asked. There was a long pause before his response appeared. "I'm bringing Marcus." My jaw dropped. Marcus, his roommate of 3 years. The one our parents referred to as his friend with pointed emphasis. The relationship that existed in the shadowy periphery of our family conversations, acknowledged but never discussed. "Raj, are you sure? Mom and Dad will freak out." "It's time," he replied simply. "If they want to use this dinner to shape the family narrative, then I'm done hiding my part of that story. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us." Now, back to the story. In that moment, something shifted inside me. If Raj, perfect people-pleasing Raj, was willing to stand his ground, how could I do any less? I called my mother back immediately. "I've made a decision about the Singh dinner," I said before she could speak. "I'll be there, and I'll be professional and respectful. But I'll be wearing clothes of my choosing, and I won't participate in any matchmaking schemes." I heard her sharp intake of breath. "Priya, please be reasonable." "I'm being extremely reasonable. I countered. I'm the designer they hired. They chose my work because of my modern aesthetic and vision. Showing up as someone else would be dishonest and unprofessional. It's not about being dishonest, she protested. It's about showing respect for tradition. I respect tradition, I said, but I won't hide behind it. And Mom, Raj is bringing Marcus to dinner. The silence that followed was so complete I checked to make sure the call hadn't dropped. I see, she said finally, her voice carefully neutral. I'll need to adjust the seating arrangements. That was it? No explosion, no emotional manipulation? I waited for the other shoe to drop, but she simply asked what time I'd be arriving and ended the call with a distracted goodbye. The week that followed was tense, filled with cryptic texts from my mother about dinner preparations and awkward calls from my father about appropriate topics of conversation for the evening. Raj and I messaged constantly, strategizing and supporting each other through what felt like preparation for battle rather than a family dinner. When the evening of the Singh dinner arrived, I stood outside my parents' house, smoothing the fabric of my carefully chosen outfit. A modern jumpsuit in a vibrant blue that complemented my skin tone, paired with statement earrings I'd designed myself. Professional, elegant, and unmistakably me. Raj pulled up in his car, Marcus beside him. My brother looked both terrified and determined as they approached, Marcus's hand reassuringly at the small of his back. Ready? Raj asked, his voice barely steady. I nodded, though neither of us made a move toward the door. What's the worst that could happen? Marcus asked, attempting to lighten the mood. Raj and I exchanged a look. Public disownment followed by years of silent treatment, we said in unison, and then laughed despite ourselves. They won't make a scene in front of the Singhs, I added, more confidently than I felt. Image is everything, remember? With that fragile reassurance, we rang the doorbell. My mother opened the door, her practiced smile faltering only briefly when she took in my outfit and Marcus's presence. You're here. Good. Everyone's in the living room. The living room, the same space, where we'd had our impromptu picnic just weeks earlier, had been transformed into a formal reception area. My father was deep in conversation with a distinguished man I recognized as Vikram Singh from the company's website. Beside them stood a younger man around my age, dressed in an impeccably tailored suit. Ah, here she is, my father called out with forced enthusiasm. Mr. Singh, this is my daughter, Priya, the creative genius behind your new brand identity. Mr. Singh turned, his expression curious rather than judgmental as he took in my modern attire. Ms. Sharma, he said, extending his hand. I must say, your designs have exceeded our expectations. The executive board was particularly impressed with how you've managed to honor our company's heritage while moving us firmly into the digital age. I shook his hand, relief washing over me. Thank you, Mr. Singh. That was exactly my intention. And this must be the brother I've heard so much about, Mr. Singh continued, turning to Raj. Your father tells me you're making quite a name for yourself in finance. Yes, sir, Raj said, his voice steady as he gestured to Marcus. This is my partner, Marcus Chen. He's an environmental attorney. I held my breath, watching my father's face for signs of the explosion I was certain would come, but he merely tightened his smile and nodded stiffly. Before anyone could respond, the younger man stepped forward. I'm Aryan Singh, he said, offering his hand first to Raj, then to Marcus, and finally to me. VP of Digital Transformation at Singh International, and the one who pushed hardest for your designs, Ms. Sharma. The progressive elements you incorporated were exactly what I've been advocating for within the company. I blinked in surprise. This was a plot twist I hadn't anticipated. As we moved to the dining room, I noticed another unexpected detail. The formal dining table had been replaced by a more casual arrangement, with cushions on the floor around a low table in the traditional Indian style. We thought we'd try something different tonight, my mother explained, catching my confused expression. Something that honors where we come from while embracing where we are now. I stared at her, wondering if this was some elaborate psychological tactic. But her smile seemed genuine, if nervous. Throughout dinner, I waited for the other shoe to drop, for my parents to make some pointed comment about marriage prospects or my career choices. But they remained cordial, if somewhat reserved. Mr. Singh dominated the conversation, speaking enthusiastically about the company's expansion plans and repeatedly praising my design work. It wasn't until dessert was served that Aryan Singh leaned toward me. "Your parents seem lovely," he said quietly, "but incredibly tense. Is everything okay?" I hesitated, unsure how much to reveal to essentially a stranger. "Family dinners are complicated," I said finally. He nodded knowingly. "Tell me about it. My parents have been trying to set me up with suitable women for years." I nearly choked on my chai. "You too?" "Constantly," he admitted with a rueful smile. "Though they've finally backed off since I came out last year." "Oh," I said, understanding dawning. "Oh," he laughed at my expression. "Is that relief I see? Were you worried this was some kind of setup?" The thought had crossed my mind, I admitted, feeling my cheeks warm. "Well, if it's any consolation." "I think you're brilliant," he said. "Just not in the market for a wife." As the evening wound down, I found myself genuinely enjoying Aryan's company, not as a potential match, but as someone who understood the complexities of balancing tradition and individual identity. When the Singhs finally departed, with promises of future collaboration and an invitation to their Diwali celebration, an awkward silence descended on our family. My father cleared his throat. "Well, that went differently than expected." "Yes," my mother agreed, giving Marcus a sidelong glance. "It certainly did." I braced myself for the lecture, the disappointment, the subtle guilt trips that had been the soundtrack of my adult life. But instead, my father simply sighed. "I suppose we should talk about everything," he said, gesturing vaguely toward Raj and Marcus, who stood close together near the door. "Yes," Raj said firmly. "We should." What followed was the most honest conversation our family had ever had, painful and raw and necessary. There were tears, mostly my mother's, raised voices, mostly my father's, and moments when it seemed the fragile bridge we'd built at our impromptu picnic would collapse entirely. But by the time the sun rose the next morning, something new had emerged from the wreckage of our parents' expectations, an understanding that their children were never going to be the perfect extensions of themselves they'd imagined. That we were whole, complex people with our own paths to forge. "I don't understand all of these choices," my father admitted as dawn broke over the kitchen where we'd talked through the night. "But I want to try." It wasn't perfect acceptance. It wasn't even close. But it was a beginning, fragile and uncertain and real. 6 months later, I received a package at my design studio. Inside was a framed photograph, our entire family, including Marcus, sitting cross-legged on the blue plaid blanket during the Diwali celebration we'd hosted together. Beside it was a note in my mother's elegant handwriting. "Sometimes the most important traditions are the ones we create ourselves." I hung the photo on my studio wall, a reminder that family, like identity, isn't something fixed and immutable. It's something we build together, one honest conversation at a time. Something that can bend without breaking, evolve without losing its essence, and sometimes the most meaningful place at the table is the one you create for yourself. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.